How do you control an entire group of people? How do you ensure that the majority of those people make the same decisions and the same choices as the next? How do you construct a mindset? Let's talk about it on today's Walking in Wealth. Greetings and thank you for tuning in to Walking in Wealth. I'm your host, JD Garnier, and you are listening to KKNO K75 AM on 107.1 FM radio in New Orleans, or you're listening to the Walking in Wealth podcast. I hope you had a productive week in your wealth creation journey. And listen, my goal is simple: to help you walk in wealth, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. To take the things that God has already given you and use those to create a life of purpose, so that wealth is much more than just what you acquire. Wealth is who you become. You are the wealth. Not your investments, not your real estate, not your business. You are the wealth. And before you have any of those things, you have a unique and specific set of talents, abilities, gifts, ideas, habits, discipline, and inclinations that form the basis of any and everything that you do in life. And once you tap into that, you start your wealth creation journey. So I repeat, you are the wealth. Listen, first things first, if you're not following me on social media, please follow me on Instagram at GarnierJD, Facebook at JD Garnier, and Twitter at JD Garnier1, and subscribe to the Walking in Wealth YouTube channel. Also, if you want to catch the show live, you can go to KKNO K75 AM or 107.1 FM radio in New Orleans, Louisiana on every Monday and Wednesday at 9 a.m. If you need someone to empower your staff, galvanize your team, or motivate your people, please reach out to me for speaking engagements. No organization is too big or too small to add value or impact. If you have questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, or you just want to expand on the topic that I talk about on the show, you can email me directly at jd@jdgarnier.com. That is jd@jdgarnier.com. How do you construct a mindset? Today, I want to talk about ideas. Everything that exists in this world started as an idea. Every single object started as a singular idea in somebody's mind. The wheel, the airplane, the iPhone, the metaverse. All of those things started as nothing but an idea. Think about that. As a matter of fact, our entire existence and the advancement of humanity is dependent on the continued manifestation and implementation of new and innovative ideas. It's the only way we can survive. As the climate changes, as society changes, as things change that we have no control over, it is paramount, it is required for us to continue to survive, to continue to come up with new ideas. That's how important they are. But what is an idea? Well, the dictionary defines an idea as an entity, such as a thought, concept, sensation, or image, actually or potentially present to the consciousness. So based on this definition, the moment that you form an idea, it exists in the universe separate and apart from yourself. An idea is its own entity. So whether you act on it or not, it exists in the universe. How many ideas do you think have existed in the universe since the beginning of mankind? A better question is, how many ideas do you think live in a graveyard that never came to fruition? See, when you come up with an idea, what happens in your brain is that tiny seeds of information are planted into the subconscious mind. A new experience, a concept in a book, a YouTube video, a conversation with a friend, any number of different outside stimulants, any number of conscious experiences can spark the birth of a new idea. And when that happens in your brain, what happens is there is a clash between the neurons in the part of your brain that stores information that you already know and the neurons in your brain that are stimulated by outside influences. So I want you to imagine that for a second. The simplest form of matter in your brain, the neurons that store information that you already know, start a clash, start a conflict, start a battle with the neurons in your brain that are stimulated by outside influences. And that clash, that battle, forms new ideas. Think about how amazing that is. That battle inside of your mind, clashing to form something that never existed before. And once it's created, it is an entity by itself. You know, if you ever saw the movie Inception, it's a good movie. It's about the mind. And in the movie, I'll just give you a quick synopsis of it. There were a group of thieves, but these thieves had a special skill. They didn't steal directly from people in the real world. What they did was they used dreams to enter the subconscious minds of people and steal information, steal ideas from their brain that they could use in the real world. And they were so good at their job that someone proposed to them a different task. Instead of stealing ideas, instead of stealing information from their mind, they wanted them to enter someone's subconscious and plant an idea. And the reason why they wanted them to plant the idea is because they wanted that person to make a certain decision in the real world. But they couldn't suggest it directly. The decision had to come from that person's brain. And the only way to ensure that was to implant the idea in their subconscious mind so that it could manifest itself in the real world. And so that's exactly what they did. They entered this person's subconscious, and immediately they started to battle. They started to battle with the neurons in the brain that store information that they already know. And there was a clash. And eventually they were able to enter the deepest, darkest, foundational parts of this person's subconscious to implant an idea that manifested itself as an action in the real world. That's how important ideas are. They guide the decisions that we make in reality. Every time you do something, the physical act of that is predetermined by the idea to do it that's developed or formed in your mind. So how do new ideas come about? Experiences, environment, interactions, things that we experience, the environment around us, the people and the things that we interact with, all of those things present the opportunity for new information to enter our minds and clash and battle with the stored information of what we already know to form new ideas. It's a never-ending process. And the reason why that process is so important is because sometimes ideas can be revolutionary. Ideas can change the course of history. They can change the dynamics of the world. And ideas can change the circumstances of an entire culture. I just want you to think about what I'm saying. I know I'm getting deep today, but I want you to think about what I'm saying. This battle in your brain at the most fundamental and foundational parts of your mind. This clash between information that you already know and outside experiences, outside environments, outside interactions, clash and battle to form new entities that have never existed. And if enough of those things are developed, they can change the course of history. I'm talking about ideas. Now, for the people in power, that's a problem. See, for the people in power, the biggest threat to their power is new ideas, a change in thought, the existence of a newly developed entity that they have no control over. For the people in power, why would they want people to have new ideas that could threaten their hold on power? That's why the North Korean leader, I won't say his name, outlaws almost anything that comes from outside of his country, especially the United States. Movies, entertainment, music, social media. He does not want any new information to enter into his country that he cannot control, because that has the ability or potential to give the people in his country new ideas. And the only idea he wants them to subscribe to is that he is the supreme leader and they must worship him. And so if any new ideas enter his country in any form, he cuts it off. If anybody shows any type of mindset other than the mindset that he wants to employ, he kills them. No new ideas. That's why parents try to shield children from inappropriate content when they're still young and immature, because they don't want to give them any new ideas. They don't want to spark something negative in the mind, because once that idea is there, you can't control how it's going to manifest itself. And so you protect them. You don't expose them to things that their young, immature minds are not prepared to understand, because they may get ideas about things that they cannot fully comprehend. And once that idea is in their mind, you can't control it. No new ideas. And so I think we can agree that if we have the ability to control the ideas of our children by controlling their environment, controlling their consumption, and if leaders have the ability to control ideas by controlling the environment and controlling the consumption, I think we can agree that in many cases, our ideas are controlled as well. How do they control them? By controlling our environment, by controlling our consumption, by controlling our senses, and by controlling our needs. See, when you control somebody's environment, then you control what they're stimulated by. You control what they have to react to. You control everything around them. And so you filter the lens through which new ideas can enter. If you watch the same shows, if you listen to the same music day in and day out, if you consume the same things each and every single day, you filter, you control a person's ideas about the world. You control their vantage point. You control what they think about. You control what they prioritize. When you control somebody's senses, their emotions, you control what they think about. You control what they worry about. If we are always constantly in a state of fear, in a state of anxiety, there's only so many ideas that can flow through those particular states. And so our ideas can be controlled through our emotions. And when you control a person's needs, when you ration out the things that they need, you put them in a sense of desperation. You control and filter the lens through which new ideas can manifest themselves. I'm talking about ideas. And when you can control the environment, the consumption, the senses, and the needs of an entire group of people, now you have control of how they think. Now you control what they think about. And when you control those things, you filter the lens through which new ideas can come about. Controlling your ideas is the simplest and easiest way to control you. See, if you limit that brain activity that I talked about earlier, that clash, that battle between information that you already know and information that is new, that is outside. When you control that process, you limit the amount of new entities that are created. And when you limit or filter the new ideas that are created, then you construct or develop a mindset that is repetitive. If an entire group of people's minds are stimulated by the same things, the same environment, the same music, the same fears, the same emotions, day in and day out, you control and filter the lens through which new ideas can be created. And now you have control of their mind. Why is any of this important? Well, have you ever asked the question why every ghetto in America looks exactly the same? It's just a question. I don't care if you go to Miami, Chicago, Atlanta, New Orleans, Los Angeles. Every single ghetto in the country looks exactly the same. Blighted houses, abandoned buildings, liquor stores, drugs, public housing. It's almost like a controlled environment. Think about that. Every single ghetto in any hood in any place in the entire country looks exactly the same. I could go to my hood in New Orleans. I can go to a hood in Philadelphia. I can go to a hood in DC or Baltimore. And regardless of where I go, it's pretty much going to look the same. Why do you think that is? Why do you think every single one of those neighborhoods has blighted, rundown houses, has liquor stores on every other block, has people walking around on drugs, selling drugs, public housing with people stacked on top of one another, abandoned buildings, factories that are run down, places to dump garbage and trash right in the middle of the neighborhood, interstates running directly through neighborhoods. It's almost as if our environment is being controlled. The book, The Color of Law, talks about this in specificity. You want to read a book on the history of land in this country, in real estate, as it relates to Black and African Americans? It's a good book to read, The Color of Law. And one of the things it talks about is how ghettos and Black neighborhoods were created. And as this country was expanding in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, cities and states and local governments were planning how to expand and how to grow and how to zone cities. And in almost all of those cases, they would always zone the Black neighborhoods in the most undesirable parts of the city. The parts of the city with the low-lying land, the areas that were easy to flood, the areas near canals, near dumping sites. They would always zone the Black neighborhoods in the most undesirable parts of the city. And what was also going on at the time is that much of the development was backed by the federal government. And one of the mandates of continued development was that Black and African American people could not own land in those newly developed neighborhoods. If they did, then the developers would lose the federal funding. And so basically, we had no choice but to live in the areas that were specifically zoned to us. That's why most Black neighborhoods are near abandoned buildings, factories that have been run down, places where people dump trash and garbage and waste. That's why you see blight everywhere. That's why it's always the Black neighborhoods that flood. This was all planned. Our environment was controlled. But another incidence of that is that you shield that group of people from the rest of society. And so now every day when they come out of their house, they see the same things. They see blight. They see liquor stores. They see drugs. They see rundown, abandoned buildings. They don't see anything nice. They don't see anything beautiful. Their environment is controlled. And as a result, the ideas that come from that environment are limited because there's no new stimulation. There's no new information entering. And so just by controlling and constructing an environment that is cut off from the rest of society, you limit the amount of brain activity that can come from these people. And if you limit the amount of brain activity, you limit the amount of new ideas that can be developed to change their own circumstances. That's why every hood in the United States looks exactly the same. That's why the hood mentality permeates from city to city. Our environment has been controlled. How do you think a child can come up with a new and innovative creation that can change the world if every day he comes out of his house, the only thing he sees is trash, is blight, is drugs? You controlling the stimulation of things necessary to generate enough brain activity to create new entities, to create new ideas. This is a tough one here. Have you ever asked the question why hip hop music has been talking about the same topics for the last 30 or 40 years? Death, violence, drugs, sex, consumerism. None of it is positive. And for the better part of the last 30 plus years, hip hop music has talked about these topics in repetition. Death, violence, drugs, sex, consumerism. Death, violence, drugs, sex, consumerism. A recipe for destruction. Our consumption is being controlled. And so for 30 years, if you're hearing about death and violence, it becomes a normal part of your life. You desensitize by it. Becomes necessary. If for the better part of 30 years you're hearing about drugs, you become accepting of it. It becomes a part of your everyday life. You're no longer offended by it. If every day for the better part of 30 plus years you're hearing about sex, it starts to consume and control your mind. Our consumption is being controlled. This is not by accident. It is the only music genre that consistently talks about death, violence, drugs, sex, and consumerism. It has permeated itself into our culture. And so now it's a part of everyday life. It's almost as if it's his normal week for a young aspiring rapper to get killed. We don't even bat an eye at it. I remember when Tupac died in 1996, we were so shocked by it because that type of stuff wasn't going on. But now we barely have time to grieve or mourn for somebody that we liked because within the next few days, somebody else is going to die. We've normalized it. And we have limited the amount of ideas that can come from that to change it. Because we're consuming the same things day in and day out. Drugs. It's almost now like it's normal to be addicted to drugs. We've become so accepting of drug use and drug habits, it's almost like it's normal. Because we hear it so much, we see it so much. The people that we look up to, that we revere, the people that sell millions and millions of records, the only thing they glorify is drug use. And so we've normalized it. And it's limiting. It is limiting our brain activity, limiting the amount of ideas that we can come up with to change our circumstances, to change the circumstances of our family, to change the circumstances of our community. Because we are all consuming the same things. This is chess. It's not checkers. When your enemy comes at you, he's not going to come at you directly. Your enemy is not going to fight you directly. Because if he does that, it becomes the survival of the fittest. And they risk the threat of injury. So when your enemy comes at you, he's going to come at you indirectly. He's going to come at you with deception. It is chess. It's not checkers. We always hear people say that term, and we never really talk about the difference. But checkers is a reactionary game. When you play checkers, it is a game of opportunity. As soon as the opportunity is there, you have to take it. They jump you, you jump them. You jump them, they jump you. Checkers is a game of opportunity. You have to take the opportunity when it's there. The goal is to move their pieces off the board as soon as possible. Because if you don't take the opportunity when it's there, you may not get it again. And so you have to take what's in front of you. You have to constantly go after what's in front of you in checkers. And that's how a lot of us live our lives. We take what's in front of us. As soon as it's there, we have to take it. We don't ask any questions. We don't have time to think about the next move and the next move. It's a game of opportunity. But chess is a game of strategy. And in order to be successful at chess, you have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your team, but you also have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent. Chess is a game of strategy. You have to be methodical. You have to be thinking about your moves 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps ahead. And if you want to destroy your opponent in chess, you do it by deception. You do it by diversion. You do it by making them notice something over here or giving them an opportunity to do something. And if they focus too much on the opportunity that's in front of them, they can't see the bigger picture. It's chess. It's not checkers. That's why every ghetto in America looks the same. That's why rap music has been rapping about the same things for the last 30 to 40 years. Because it controls our environment, it controls our consumption, and it controls the level of brain activity necessary to create new ideas to change our circumstances and the circumstances of our community. If you can control the environment and consumption of an entire group of people, you can limit and direct the types of ideas that come from that group. If you can limit the ideas of that group, then you can control or at least predict how they think. And if you can control how someone thinks, self-check, self-destruction. They don't even have to do anything. We doing it to ourselves. See, back in the day, they controlled our ideas by limiting information, limiting education, limiting exposure. The information was hidden. We didn't know how to do certain things. We didn't have access to certain things. A small group of people controlled all of the information. And that's how they controlled our ideas. The internet changed all that. Today, you can't hide information. It's everywhere for us to consume. And so today, the way that our ideas are controlled is by flooding us with so much information that we don't even know what's true. We have access today to so much information, we have no idea what is real and what is not. Have you Googled something lately? See, years ago when you used to Google something, the first search page would be the most reputable and accurate information. The proven sites, the proven sources that you knew you were getting accurate information. Today, when you Google something, you don't know what you're going to get. You're going to get a bunch of obscure articles and a bunch of obscure websites that you've never heard of, referencing things that sound believable, but there's no real data to back it up. There's no reputable sources to back it up. And most likely, it's going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. Try Googling, are drugs healthy? I guarantee you will find some websites that tell you that drugs are healthy. See, we have access to so much information. There's so much information available that we don't know what's true. And so now, all of this new stimulant, all this new information, all of our new ideas are being formed on false pretenses, which changes absolutely nothing. It's chess. It's not checkers. That's why now people get their information from Facebook or TikTok or Instagram and don't even know how to validate whether or not that information is true. It's crazy time. And see, what used to happen back in the day is every once in a while, somebody would break through. Even though the gatekeepers control the environment and control consumption, back in the day, there was always that talented 10th. That talented 10th that was going to push through regardless. That talented 10th that based on an experience, based on something that happened to them, based on something that they were exposed to, they would gain a new set of ideas that would lead them on a different path than the masses, and they would break through. And with the age of technology, it started to get harder and harder to contain us from the information necessary to free ourselves. And so they needed something, a single source of enjoyment, of pleasure, that they could communicate the message to us without them having to hide anything. And that's what our music has become. It has become that single source of enjoyment, of pleasure, that they communicate the plan to destroy us without having to hide. And we can put a song on the radio that references taking drugs 30, 40, 50 times and put that song in rotation every 30 minutes. You can put a song in rotation that justifies irresponsible sex over and over and over and over again and put it in rotation. We can listen to a song that kills somebody every other verse and put it in rotation every 30 minutes and have our children listen to all of these things. And it becomes the source of our ideas. It becomes the source through which we see the world. And now we see the world as violent. We see our solutions as drugs. We see our only source of pleasure as sex. That's what our music has become. Am I lying? I mean, honestly, that's what it has become. And I don't want to get off on a tangent on music, but my point is that the hood mindset is an attempt to limit the ideas that come from our community. If you are constantly living in a state of fear, if you are constantly living in a state of anger, if in a state of victimization, in a state of seeking pleasure, you will never be in the right mindset to change your circumstances, to change your life. I'm talking about ideas, the simplest form of creation. The hood mentality has attached itself to our culture by filtering, directing, and shaping our ideas about the world. And so we went from community that focused on the greater good of the community to a community that focuses on the greater good of me. We've become a selfish, pleasure seeking, spiritually detached, gluttonous, vain, unprincipled, devalued community. I mean, am I lying? This is a hard pill to swallow because I'm talking about my own people. But am I lying? Everything is about me. What can I get? What can I do? What you gonna do for me? We pleasure seeking. Everybody's seeking how to be happy, how to get pleasure, not purpose, but pleasure. Pleasure is at the forefront of every decision that we make. We're spiritually detached. In a time where mental health is at the forefront of everything. It's all we talk about is mental health. Mental health. We have more people killing themselves than ever. And the solutions that we hear, medication, therapy. I'm fine with therapy. But we can't even suggest anymore that someone have a direct and authentic relationship with God. We can't even suggest anymore that someone get on their knees and pray and ask for forgiveness and ask for wisdom and ask for guidance. We're spiritually detached. In a time where our minds need as much spirituality as possible. We're gluttonous, wasteful. People always say you can't tell people how to spend their money, and that's true. But I know when you're making a bad decision. And when I see rappers on TV flashing thousands and thousands of dollars in cash, buying hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of jewelry, worth of luxury goods, it's wasteful. It's gluttonous. What is the point? But we've been told that those are the things that validate us. We've been given the idea through our environment and through our consumption that those things are necessary for our validation, for our success. And so it becomes a mindset that we need those things to complete us. Am I making sense? I mean, somebody has to say something. This is what society looks like now. I know what the income numbers look like. I work in finance. I work with economics. I know what the income numbers look like. I know what percentage of people make what. But every time I go in the mall, the luxury stores, the Louis Vuitton, the Gucci store, they are jam-packed with people buying things that I know they can't afford. A pair of shoes costs $1,000. The median income is less than $50,000. A decent sized bag is going to cost $4,000 or $5,000. The economics don't add up. And so we've become willing to sacrifice the things that we need for pleasure. We've become willing to justify foolish financial purchases for validation. We have become willing to buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't even like. You think that mindset is by accident? No. Unprincipled. We don't even have any standards. Anything goes. There's no principles. There's no values. Anything goes. When did that become acceptable? All because we have allowed our ideas to be filtered through our music, through our culture, and through our environment. But you know what? Of all those negative ideas, the one idea that is at the root of our destructive behavior, the one singular idea that is the cause of all of the things that we're doing in our community, is the idea that my loss is your gain and your gain is my loss. The zero sum game. The idea that your gain is my loss is at the root of all of the conflict in the black community. See, a zero sum game is a mathematical representation in game theory and economic theory of a situation which involves two sides, where the result is an advantage for one side and an equivalent loss for the other. In other words, one player's gain is equivalent to the other player's loss. That's how we think. Your gain is my loss. See, the zero sum game is based on the idea that there is a finite amount of resources. And if you get something, that means I can't have it. If you advance, that means you're preventing me from advancing. See, that mentality is the cause of jealousy. It's the cause of animosity. It's the cause of broken relationships. It prevents togetherness. It prevents solidarity. Because we believe that there's a finite amount of resources available. And if you get something, that means I don't get it. That's the crab in the barrel mentality. If you get up in the barrel, that means I'm still down. So for me to get up, I have to pull you down. That mentality, that idea has been permeated throughout our culture. And it is the reason why we can't work together anymore. It's affected every part of our existence, our relationships. More than ever, all I see is conflict between men and women. Women saying men don't do this, men saying women don't do this. Women expecting something in order to give, men expecting something in order to give. This zero-sum game mentality. It affects business relationships. That's why we can't do business with one another. That's why we don't support one another. Because we have this idea that if this person improves, that's taken away from my improvement. So I can't support them. I can't invest in their business. I don't want to see them do well. That mindset has to change. That idea has to change. Your gain is not my loss. Your gain is our gain if we together. I want you to win. See, the zero-sum game surmises that the answers that we need are external. That there's only a finite amount of resources available, and what you get takes away from what I have the opportunity to get. That is the singular mindset that we need to change. And so how do we change that? I already told you. If an idea is its own entity and it is created in your mind at the most foundational levels of your brain, then you are the main resource that you need to change your circumstances. If you don't have anything else, you have the ability to form new ideas. And once an idea is formed, it becomes its own entity, separate and apart from you. And so if we can expand the amount of ideas that are created, then we can expand the existence and grow the existence of entities that are apart from us, that we have the opportunity to manifest in the real world. And so the new idea is not that your gain is my loss. That means that there's a finite amount of resources. The new idea is that you are the wealth. You are the source. It starts with you. You have an unlimited amount of resources already inside of you. That is the mentality that we need. Once you have that mentality, what happens next is accountability. You stop looking externally for the things that you have, the things that you don't have, the things that you need, and you start to look from within. You start to look inside of yourself. That's the mentality that we need. Self-accountability. So how do you change this mindset? How do you deprogram all of these things that have been programmed in our mind. You need two things. The first thing you need is direction. And that starts with purpose. If you don't know your purpose, you're already losing. If you don't know your life instructions, then how do you know where you're going? You need direction. And once you know your purpose, you need a core set of principles by which to guide you in life. What do you stand for? What do you represent? What do you live by? The reason why you need that, the reason why you need direction, purpose, principles, values, is because you're going to have to put yourself in different environments, in different situations, in different circumstances. But your character must remain consistent. You can't change who you are based on your environment, based on your circumstances, based on your consumption. You have to be able to be grounded no matter where you are. And that grounding comes from your purpose, your direction, and the principles that you live by, the principles that guide your decision making. I have a whole show that I talk about how to find your purpose. You're going to need that. You're going to have to find that from within. But once you know your purpose, once you have established a core set of values and principles that are going to guide you in life, once you can answer the question, what do you stand for? What do you live by? What do you believe in? The next thing you're going to need is exposure. In order to change your mindset, you're going to have to change your environment. You're going to have to change what you consume. You're going to have to expose yourself to different things. And that can have a profound effect on the way that you view the world and the way that you view yourself. You know, I grew up in uptown New Orleans, in the Holly Grove area, 17th Ward. And people that know that area, they're familiar with that part of the city. It's a tough area to grow up in. You know, I grew up right on Eagle Street. And I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And so at that time, that was the height of the drug and the crack epidemic. So there was a lot of stuff going on in my neighborhood, especially right across the street. I was seeing all kind of things happening. It's nothing but a whole bunch of men on the corner all the time. That was the neighborhood I grew up in. That was the environment that I grew up in. And just like most of my friends, that's what we saw all the time, you know. And New Orleans is not an easy place to grow up in, you know. Especially as a man, you always had to be prepared to assert yourself physically. You had to know how to fight. And so, not much different than most people, that's the environment I grew up in. But what was different was that I was accepted into an elementary school called Lusher. And it was one of the only, I think there was only maybe 2 or 3. But it was one of the only elementary schools that was not governed by New Orleans School Board District. It was independent. It was a well-run school. It was heavily funded by donors, and it was nationally recognized as one of the best elementary schools in the country. And it was only about 2 or 3 miles from where we grew up, but it was in a different part of the city, in the Garden District area, where there was universities, there were all kinds of large houses and mansions and things of that nature. It was in that area. And not only did I get accepted into the school, I was in the gifted program. And so every single day I would leave my house, I would leave my neighborhood, I would leave that environment that I was seeing every day, and I would go to this school, and I was exposed to so many different things. I had people in my class that were from all over the world. I can remember having friends from Fiji and from Great Britain and from Honduras and from Australia. One of my first elementary school teachers was had a British accent. He was from England. And being in the gifted program, they would expose us to all types of things at a very young age. I was learning Shakespeare, and I was learning Greek mythology, and we would go to the symphony, and we would go to the orchestra, and I was being exposed to so many different things, and at the same time living in an environment of drugs and violence. But that exposure clashing with the information that I already knew, the people that I lived around, the people that I talked to every day, clashing with these new experiences, with these new ideas, it formed so many different things in my mind that it took my life on a different path than most people that I know. Just the exposure alone changed the way that I viewed the world, and it changed the way that I viewed myself. And so even though I was growing up in an environment that was controlled, my consumption was not under control. And it changed my life. It changed my mindset. And it changed the trajectory of my family. And my point in saying all of that, my point in telling you all of that, is that exposure is extremely important in changing your mindset. There's a theory, a concept that I call mind confusion. If you work out, you're familiar with the term muscle confusion. Muscle confusion is the idea that by continually changing up your workouts, you confuse your muscles in a way that forces them to continuously react and develop by adjusting to new and different workouts. Because if you do the same routine over and over again, your muscles and your body becomes complacent and you don't see any results. So muscle confusion is very effective in muscle development and growth because it confuses your muscles and keeps them on alert by continuously changing up your routines. Well, mind confusion is a similar concept. See, if we do the same things over and over, if we watch the same shows, if we go to the same places, if we talk to the same people, if we are in the same environment, our minds become complacent. That spark that I talked about earlier of new ideas being formed, it doesn't happen because we are repeating the same things over and over again. Mind confusion takes you out of that comfort zone. It takes you out of that environment. It changes your consumption. Mind confusion is a deliberate effort in changing and stimulating your mind in ways that forces it to be on alert so that it has no choice but to develop and form new ideas to expand your mind and to grow. mind confusion. That should be all of our, that should be on all of our tasks to do. Every week, we should want to expose ourselves to something different, to something new. Read a different book, watch a different show, listen to a different podcast, spend time in a different area, travel somewhere. Continuously exposing your mind to new ideas, to new experiences, to new information forces you. It forces your mind to stay on alert. It forces it to expand, to adjust to these different experiences, to these different stimulants, and you have no choice but to grow. That's how we get out of this mindset. That's how we change all of these ideas that we have accepted. Because if things continue to go the way that they are, if we continue to allow our minds to be filtered through a controlled environment, through a controlled consumption, through the control of our emotions, through the control of our needs, it is going to continue to limit our ability to think for ourselves. And it's going to lead to our destruction. I told you earlier how important ideas are. Just for us to survive, we have to develop new and innovative ideas. But when you take a group of people and you limit and you control their ideas, and you control their environment, and you control their consumption, the new ideas start to slow down. And what starts to happen is if you're not generating new ideas to develop to a new and changing world, then you self-destruct. You slowly start to kill yourself. That's how important ideas are. And so we have to change our mindset. We have to change our environment. We have to change what we consume and put ourselves in positions to form new and innovative ideas to change our circumstances and the circumstances of our family. That's my message. Thank you for tuning in to Walking in Wealth. I'll see you next time.